Hello friends and welcome back to the channel where today I'm going to walk you through how to fight the brand new LOTAN boss from Act 9.2. Now LOTAN is a bit of a bump up in difficulty and complexity from the frankly very easy Orochi boss, but you'll be happy to know that she really doesn't approach Glycon or Bahamut in that area either. Now whether you're here because she just decimated your entire team or you're looking for an idea of what to expect before you jump into Act 9.2, you've come to the right place because I'm going to break it all down for you right now. One quick disclaimer before we get into the guide: all of the gameplay that you are going to see in this video was recorded on the LOTAN beta that the CCP was given access to several months ago. Now, as a result of our beta testing and our feedback, there were several changes made to the fight since then, but we were not given a second round of testing. So if you see something on the screen that doesn't quite match with what I'm saying, assume that what I'm saying is accurate because I was not able to re-record the gameplay. And if there are any further changes to the fight after the guide goes live, I'll leave them all in a pinned comment below. Alright, with that out of the way, let's start with a few very important things that you should know before you head into the fight. The very first thing that you need to know about LOTAN is that she is immune to Power Lock, Power Drain, Power Burn, Power Steal, Armor Break, and Armor Shattered. Those last two should make a lot of sense. They're most commonly found in Cosmic Champs, and LOTAN is of course a Mystic Champ. Now in addition, the ability accuracy of all damaging effects is reduced by 90% for all non-Science champions. So this includes damage over time effects, both active debuffs and passive, and burst damage effects as well. And as you'll see in a bit, there are several reasons why you want to avoid anyone but Science champs for fighting her anyway. The second thing that you need to know is that at the start of every phase, LOTAN will banish some effects. Now in practice, this is very similar to how the Grandmaster and Nameless Grandmaster ban you from doing certain things throughout the fight. In this fight though, if you trigger a banished effect, it is removed immediately and LOTAN gains 12% of her missing power. Now notice here that this is a percentage of her missing power and not a percentage of her max power, meaning you can't ever give her a special 3 by repeatedly applying these banished effects. Now in general, you really want to avoid utilizing any of these effects. However, in some instances, you might actually want to give her some power, and thus it might be beneficial to have controlled access to one or more of them as the fight goes on. We'll talk about this a little bit more once we get into the phases of the fight. Number 3, you've probably noticed in the gameplay clips already that there is this giant swirling cloud in the background of the arena, and you thought maybe it was just a new stage that they designed specifically for this fight. Not exactly. The giant cloud is called the Maelstrom, and it's actually an interactive part of the fight itself. So functionally, it is very similar to the green door mechanic that the leader uses. So entering the Maelstrom triggers a 5-second timer, and in each subsequent phase, the timer is going to be reduced by half a second. If this timer expires, you will gain a passive degen on you for every second that you remain in the Maelstrom. And these degens are very potent. They do about 15,000 damage over 10 seconds, so just a few of them stacking up is going to be deadly. Now the timer will be paused while LOTAN is attacking or using her special attack. Exiting the Maelstrom on either side will remove the timer and any degens that you may have stacked up on you. Now the most dangerous part of the Maelstrom is probably at the very start of the fight, because the degen timer starts as soon as the fight does, and you are starting the fight in the very middle of the Maelstrom. So you either need to be very aggressive right away and push LOTAN back towards her wall, or play it passive and back out of the Maelstrom on your side. If you don't, you're probably going to get some degens on you right away, and you're going to be playing from behind the entire fight. The last note I want to make about the Maelstrom is that it will shrink with every subsequent phase of the fight. So in phase 1, it's going to cover about half the arena or so, and then in later phases, it's going to cover only like a quarter or even less than that. That is until the final phase of the fight when it's going to cover the entire arena, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Alright, let's move on to the two main gameplay mechanics in this fight, and they are called Desecration and Smite. By now you should be used to these kinds of bosses having some sort of protection mechanic that you need to disable in order to do meaningful damage, and LOTAN is no different. At the start of the fight, she is going to gain 20 Desecration Charges, and these are going to provide 80% protection from all damage sources. She will gain 1 charge every 5 seconds on a timer. This timer is going to be paused during all special attacks for 1 second on all hits and for 3 seconds on any combo ender or any knockdown. Now it sounds like it could be really annoying, but in practice it's really not that bad. Remember, with a striker you can actually get access to 2 combo enders and a potential knockdown from a special just in one combo, so the timer is going to be paused more often than you think it is. That being said, you don't want to let those charges stack up because your goal in this fight is to be removing them and eventually getting them down to 0. Okay, so how do you remove them? Your attacker will gain a Smite Charge when either you or LOTAN are in a certain place in the arena, and this changes from phase to phase. So an example of this might be having LOTAN against her wall, or you being up against your wall, or even being in the middle of the Maelstrom itself. Once you gain a Smite Charge, you then need to perform a specific action which will cause the Smite Charge to remove one or more Desecration Charges. And again, these actions are going to differ from phase to phase, but they're all very simple things like using your second medium attack, using a striker, using your special attack. One other thing to note here is that the Smite Charges are not indefinite. If you or LOTAN move away from the required spot, the Smite Charge will expire in like half a second. So the goal here is to gain the Smite Charge by putting yourself or her in the required location and then immediately using the required action to use that Smite Charge to remove some of the Desecration Charges. Now, as a bonus, extra Desecration Charges will be removed whenever you do one of these required actions if LOTAN is suffering from specific non-damaging debuffs. And once again, these are going to differ from phase to phase. One phase it might be Trauma, another phase is Petrify, a third is Suppression, things like that. Remember that LOTAN is a mystic, and these debuff types are going to be most commonly found in the Science class, since Science champs are designed to have the advantage here. I do want to note here that no single champ in the game has access to all of the different non-damaging debuff types that you might want to use against LOTAN. That's because, again, it is intended to be a bonus and not required for fighting her. Now, if you are struggling with a specific phase of the fight, bringing a champ with access to the debuff or debuffs for that phase is going to help you get through it much more quickly. Once you remove all of the Desecration Charges, LOTAN will enter a wounded state, or what this fight calls Sanctified, and this will be timed, of course. While she's in this wounded state, the Maelstrom degen is disabled, your special 3 will be locked, all non-damaging debuffs on LOTAN will be paused except for stun, and she will take 150% damage from all sources. If you are able to remove 33% of her max health in a single wounded state, the timer for it is going to end immediately, and this is intended to prevent players from nuking through entire phases in one go, and this also means that you will have to do this loop at a minimum of 3 times per phase. Alright, now that you have a basic understanding of what the fight looks like, let's talk about the best champs to bring on your team. Again, LOTAN is a mystic champ, so it shouldn't be a surprise that most of the best options for her are going to be found in the Science class. Now, ideally you want a Science champ with access to some type of burst damage, and access to one or more types of non-damaging debuffs is a really big bonus as well. Now, when it comes to top options, there are 4 that really stood out for me during my testing. My favorite option by far was Deathless She-Hulk. Her burst damage from the traumas really helps you chunk through her health bar during that wounded phase, and you can easily hit that 33% cap without too much difficulty. Remember that degen's burst damage ramps up over the course of the fight, so you'll be getting through those phases faster and faster as long as you can keep those traumas stacked. The other top options are pretty similar in that they also have some sort of burst damage component. Red Hulk is tanky, he is very easy to use, ramps up almost immediately against Mystic champs, but he doesn't have access to any non-damaging debuffs. Photon has those debuffs, she has incredible burst damage, and she can stay in Pure Light form for quite a while during this fight. And then finally, Titania has debuffs and she has fantastic damage, but the effects from her Haymaker ability will be banished pretty early on in the fight, so you will have to deal with some of that power gain that we talked about a bit earlier. Now, if you don't have any of those top options available, your second tier options are going to be champs with some sort of resistance to degen, such as Hulk, Spider Ham, Mr. Negative, and even Count Nefaria. If you are struggling with the degen from the Maelstrom, these are the champs that are going to help you survive a little bit longer during the fight. And then your next best options are pretty much any science champ. I was able to get solos during my testing with Void, Luke Cage, Sentry, Overseer, and the brand new Falcon should also be very good. As for champs you want to avoid, obviously you don't really want to be using cosmic champs because most of them have uncontrollable access to effects that are going to be banished throughout the fight, which means you're going to be dealing with a lot of power gain, a lot of special baiting, a lot of special dexing. In addition, you really want to avoid any non-science champ who relies heavily on damage over time or burst damage effects, since the accuracy of those effects are going to be reduced by 90% for the entire fight. Alright, one more thing before we jump into the fight itself. There are 5 different phases to this fight, and similar to previous boss fights, some of the effects are going to persist from phase to phase, but the methods for gaining Smite Charges and removing Desecration Charges are going to be different for every phase. In addition, LOTAN's maximum Desecration Charges will increase by 2 with every phase, which means if you aren't removing them fast enough, she is going to be able to stack up more and more, and it will take you a bit longer to get rid of them. I'm going to talk you through all of these phases, of course, but I wanted to put this table up on the screen just so you can come back and reference it if you need to. With all that being said, though, let's jump right into the fight. Alright, at the start of the fight you'll be in phase 1, and your first goal here is to get out of the Maelstrom before the degen timer expires. You have 5 seconds to do this, so try to be aggressive, push her back towards her wall. When her back is against the wall, you're going to gain a Smite Charge, and then anytime you have one, use a medium combo ender or a special one to remove 4 Desecration Charges. If LOTAN is suffering from either a slow or trauma debuff, then each of these attacks will remove 5 Desecration Charges instead. Remember here that you don't need to use a full combo to use a medium combo ender, and that it's perfectly fine to do a medium combo to remove that Desecration without giving her too much power. At the conclusion of this phase, you'll see a little animation where she kind of regathers her strength, she'll heal back to full health, and then the next phase will start. Moving on to phase 2, and starting in this phase, LOTAN will be unstoppable when using her heavy attack. In this phase, you want to keep your back against your own wall in order to gain that Smite Charge. Now this is definitely a little bit trickier because it means you really don't have anywhere to run, and you do need to work on balancing gaining that Smite Charge with kind of pushing her back a bit to create some space for yourself. Be careful not to push her too far though, because you obviously don't want to end up in the Maelstrom and taking degen. Now in this phase you want to switch from your medium combo enders to your light combo enders. So what I would recommend here is to gain the Smite Charge, parry, and then do 4 light attacks. In addition, your striker will also remove Desecration Charges, so you can also sidestep into your striker. Each of these actions will remove 4 Desecration Charges, but if LOTAN is suffering from either suppression or weakness debuffs, those actions will instead remove 6 Desecration Charges. Clearing your health bar will trigger the cutscene again, and then the next phase will start. Okay, now we're in phase 3, and starting in this phase, LOTAN is totally stun immune. In this phase, spacing becomes even more important because now you need to keep both yourself and LOTAN in the space between one of the walls and the Maelstrom. Now this space is fairly large now given that the Maelstrom has shrunk a couple of times, but remember to manage your combos, end them early before you push her too far into the middle of the arena. Now in this phase you can remove Desecration by performing a well-timed block or by using your special 2, but keep in mind that since she's stun immune, you should not expect a parry stun to occur. Well-timed blocks will remove 2 Desecration Charges, and your special 2 will remove 6 charges. Remember that if you're good at reparrying, you can get multiple well-timed blocks in a row, and if LOTAN is suffering from either a taunt or exhaustion effect, the number of charges removed will be increased to 4 and 8 respectively. Once you get through a few more wounded cycles and clear her health bar again, the cutscene will again play and you'll move on to phase 4. Okay, moving on to phase 4, and hopefully by now you have had a lot of practice getting that full dex down on her special 1, because starting here, the special 1 will be completely unblockable. In this phase, you're going to gain a Smite Charge whenever either you or LOTAN steps inside the Maelstrom. Now you might think it's obviously better for her to be in the Maelstrom and not you so that you can avoid the degen, but you are kind of reliant on her staying put long enough to get that Smite charge. And the advantage of you stepping in and out is that you have total control of when you do it, and remember you have 5 seconds before the degen actually triggers, which is more than enough time to actually consume your Smite charge and remove Desecration. Now in this phase, you need to trigger Dexterity against any of Lotan's attacks, and that's going to remove 2 Desecration Charges. In addition, using a heavy attack will remove 6. Now remember that she is stun immune and her heavies are passively unstoppable, so unless you have a slow or decelerate effect on her, your only real opening for a heavy attack is after a striker, so plan accordingly. If Lotan is suffering from either a physical vulnerability or Petrify debuff, a Dex will remove 4 charges, and a Heavy will instead remove 8. This phase definitely ramps up the difficulty a little bit, but once you chunk through her health bar one more time, the cutscene will trigger and the final phase will begin. Alright, you've made it to the final phase, and here's where things really get hectic. In this phase, the Maelstrom covers the entire arena, and each of your successful hits against Lotan will refresh that 5-second degen timer, which means you need to stay aggressive. If you do get a degen on you, don't panic, because hitting her will remove it immediately. Now starting in this phase, her Special 2 is also fully unblockable, but in general I would recommend that you avoid it anyways because the Special 1 is a much easier dex, and we'll cover that more in a few minutes. Now this phase differs from previous ones because you're going to gain Smite and remove Desecration pretty much at the same time. To gain a Smite charge, you need to trigger Dexterity against the second to last hit of either of her specials. Doing so grants you an untouchable passive, and from here you need to dash forward and trigger a miss against the last hit of either of her specials. If you do this against the Special 1, you'll remove 4 Desecration, and if you want to risk it against the Special 2, you'll instead remove 8. We'll cover the timing for each of these in a few minutes, but again, I would recommend you stick with the Special 1 here. This phase is chaotic, it's very dangerous, but it really is a lot of fun. Removing all of her Desecration charges will trigger one final wounded phase, and you'll be free to knock her out, and at this point give yourself a crisp high five or a yell out a cheer of victory for a job well done. Alright, let's move on to her special attacks. We'll start with the Special 1 at half speed. So the first hit of the Special 1 is this Blast, which is an easy dex here, as you'll see. Then the next hit is a Hammer Throw, which you can just outdistance. Then there's another Hammer Throw, which you do have to dex. And finally a third Hammer Throw, which you have to dex, and then you can go in and safely punish. Now I'm going to show you it again, this time with some audio cues. Alright, now let's show it at full speed with the audio cues. And then finally one more time at full speed, but this time it's in the final phase where you have to dash into the last hit to punish. Alright, let's move on to the Special 2 at half speed, and this special I find much more difficult than the Special 1, and again I would recommend that you stick to baiting only the Special 1 if possible. So the first hit is this giant red blast, you just dex that. There's a second blast, you dex that, and then she's going to slam her hammer down. The VFX for that is missing at the moment, but there's like a giant electrical blast that fires out from her toward you that you need to dex. And again, I find the timing pretty tricky. Let's go ahead and cover that at half speed with the audio cues. And then finally, one more time at full speed with the audio cues. One final thought regarding the difficulty of this fight. Lotan is definitely a bit trickier than Orochi, but the skill asks to me are still very clear, and so many champs are good for her that you are almost certainly going to have somebody on your roster who is viable for the fight. I personally enjoyed this fight a lot more than I did the Orochi fight, and although I managed to get some solos on the CCP server, keep in mind that those were with practice. And with that being said, don't go into this fight expecting to get a solo. It is okay to use items on a boss fight like this, and although it might be frustrating if things don't click for you right away, don't give up, stick with it, pause the fight and reference the guide if you need to, and you're going to get through it, I promise. Alright folks, that's going to do it for another boss guide, and I sincerely hope that it was helpful to you. If you have any questions about the fight, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. I do read all of my comments, and I will respond to most of them. If you found this guide helpful, again, please let me know in the comments below, and you can do me a huge favor in return by pressing that like button and sharing the video with your friends, your alliance mates, or anybody else who you think might be struggling with this boss fight. Finally, I would ask that you please consider subscribing to the channel if you aren't already. You can always change your mind later, but I do think you're going to like what I have to offer. Good luck out there against LOTAN, and as always, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next time.